Welcome back to the channel, folks. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Kang, the time-traveling conqueror from Ant Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. As the next big bad of the MCU, Kang bears some similarity to his predecessor, Thanos, in the aspect of the twisted logic to his motivation and mindset. Given that this variant of Kang is but a shadow of what's to come, with many more variants possibly on the way, for the sake of precision, this entry will deal specifically with the variant we see in this film for now. Of course, I'm open to covering the other variants in future entries as well. Although a vengeful and highly destructive megalomaniac, Kang is the hero of his own story. For a good portion of the film, Kang exudes a chronic sadness in his expression, resembling one who is burdened with the weight of an immense responsibility. The scars on his face inadvertently highlight this sadness, giving him the appearance of having tears of sorrow constantly streaming down his face. Much of Kang's burden arises from his time travel and his enlightenment regarding the future. Apart from his sadness, another recurring trait that is seen, albeit not as often, is his feeling of immense dread. Throughout the film, Kang constantly mentions that he knows how it all ends, referencing the eventual but sure destruction of the multiverse. As he recounts to Janet, his variants were playing with time like children, possibly creating time paradoxes and, more importantly, incursions between universes, which we've seen in Multiverse of Madness, to have cataclysmic world-ending effects. And in Loki Season 1, He Who Remains mentions that the chaos caused by variants crossing into other universes would eventually incur the punishing wrath of the creature known as Alioth, an entity which would consume all time and space. So it's no exaggeration to say that the fate of literally everything is on the line, not just in one world, but in what could be an infinite number of timelines. Kang in Quantumania was the first to realize that the timeline was broken and that chaos was spreading across reality, the kind which would eventuate in the collapse of the multiverse. In what we can assume to be an attempt to protect his own timeline and his universe, Kang resorted to the nefarious solution of eliminating the other timelines. In his own words, that's what conquerors do. They burn the broken world and build a new one. This led to the multiversal war, and when we fast forward to the end, we see it was resolved by He Who Remains, a Kang variant who managed to eliminate all the timelines save for one, leading to only one single standalone timeline left. The Time Variance Authority was then established, and any new variants from other timelines are eliminated in a process called pruning. So Kang in Quantumania started the multiverse war, while He Who Remains was the one who saw it to completion, the one variant of Kang who proved to be the victor. On a side note, it's unlikely that Kang in Quantumania and He Who Remains are the same variant, for two main reasons. He Who Remains doesn't have the same facial scars that Kang in Quantumania has, and the three Kangs at the end mention the death of the one who was exiled, presumably referencing the one who was just defeated by the Wasp and Ant Man. But to return to the issue at hand, we can see how Kang would perceive himself to be a necessary evil. He doesn't appear to take any devious pleasure in his actions, but does so out of the notion that they are the only path to take. When Janet gives protest to the wiping out of other timelines, he simply dismisses it with the statement, "I wish that mattered." Again, Kang has seen the future and the fact that the multiverse is already on the brink of collapse. So if the variants in the dying multiverse pose a threat to his own timeline, then the multiverse be damned, along with his other variants as well. Surely it would be better to just have one cruel conqueror rather than an infinite number, and surely stifling order would be a better scenario than cataclysmic chaos. I'm sure these thoughts must have surfaced in his mind at some point, serving as justification for the elimination of entire timelines and universes, the casualty count of which could be in the quadrillions. As he mentions before launching his army from the quantum realm, history is not written but forged, and naturally the only history that he would be concerned with is that of his own universe, forged in the fiery crucible of the multiverse war. It's unclear as to how much destruction that this variant of Kang engaged in, but it must have been a staggering amount given its effect on his frame of mind, namely his utter lack of regard for the lives of others. Kang hints at this when he asks Scott, "Have I killed you before?" in a nonchalant manner, as if one was asking for the time of day. Given that he's already slated to wipe out entire timelines, then by deduction the lives of individuals by extension wouldn't matter to him, being reduced to casualties already on the chopping block. And with the possibly infinite scope of the multiverse, he has encountered numerous variants of the same person. It's likely that eliminating the same person over and over, only to meet them again in another variant, has desensitized him to the act of killing, as it gives somewhat of a sense of futility to it. The lives of his victims, then, are perhaps just like his army, nameless and faceless at this point. As he also tells Scott concerning the Avengers, they all blur together after a while. But while Kang is driven to preserve his own timeline, we must also remember that at the same time he is equally driven by his pride and his need for vengeance on a similar magnitude. The concept of winning and losing is a recurring theme with Kang, and he appears to be somewhat touchy over the fact that he lost to his variants and was exiled to the quantum realm. Of course, there could be some genuine cause for grief from his exile, and Kang hints at this when he tells Janet that she has no idea what he has lost. But Kang's fixation on winning is perhaps a byproduct of his pride, which we get a hint of in the moment when he mocks Scott for thinking he could win. It must have been a humongous blow to his ego that he was beaten by a less prominent Avenger, one whom he threw shade on for talking to ants and one whom he literally tried to stomp like an insect earlier. Kang's pride is perhaps what makes him hostile to his variant counterparts, of course aside from the fact that they pose a threat to the multiverse. The hostility from pride is a natural phenomena, as by virtue of pride, it's not a trait that would appreciate having peers on the same level as you. So if you were a prideful person and you met a variant of yourself, chances are the two of you would not really get along. We see this with Loki in his series when the whole bunch of them ended up betraying one another. Also with Kang's variants at the end of Quantumania, where there appears to be some passive-aggressive undertones among them. On the whole, was Kang a misguided villain or one who was truly malicious? Time will tell, and perhaps we might have to wait for the events of the Kang dynasty to unfold first. But ultimately it would probably come down to the notion of whether there is no other choice, and just how much Kang's motivation is centered around saving his own universe as opposed to taking revenge on his variants. As with Thanos, while his intentions are sympathetic, his actions are not, as he could have used the Infinity Stones to double the resources instead of halving the population. So the issue at hand would be whether Kang has a way of saving his own timeline without resorting to bloodshed. He claims to have seen the end and know it all, but just maybe there could be something he may have missed, a better alternative than simply wiping out the other universes. After all, when his true intentions were exposed to Janet after his time machine was fixed, Kang promised her that he would spare her universe. Assuming that Kang came from a different Earth, then his promise to Janet presupposes a state where two worlds can coexist peacefully. And if that can happen, then perhaps there is a chance for the multiverse to exist without conflict as well. But on the flip side, if there truly was no other way for Kang to preserve his timeline, and his act of destroying the other universes was simply a means to salvage what was already on the brink of destruction, then perhaps he could be argued to be a necessary evil, without lessening the weight of his actions.